How many of you remember taking the ACT, SAT, or both? How many of you remember sitting in a cramped classroom that was eerily quiet for at least 4 hours? Awful, right? Standardized tests aren't just tedious and boring, they're ruining our education system. According to a 2009 article, Why Standardized Tests Don't Measure Educational Quality, they're not even very good at measuring student growth or intellect. Hi, my name is Julio Martinez. I'm on the road to becoming a teacher, and I spent the last 3 years compiling research for my dissertation on how to improve the school system. There's so much that I can talk about, but one of the most critical things that we can start with is revolutionizing the standardized testing system. But first, we're going to go ahead and address the problem and the negative effects it has on schools, teachers, students, and even the community overall. Then we're going to talk about how this problem came to be and how it ended up being so prominent. And finally, we're going to look at everything we talked about, and we're going to try to come up with a solution on how we can begin changing up the system. But first, let's go ahead and look at the damage. And by damage, I'm not talking about the students being bored. I'm talking about communities deteriorating because of poor schools. And let's go ahead and start there with the schools, actually. Many people don't know this, but a lot of the school's budget comes from how well they do on standardized tests. In a sense, it's like the schools themselves are the ones being tested. Poor scores lead to a lack of funding. A lack of funding leads to a lack of resources like textbooks, study guides, worksheets, etc. And without these resources, then the students are destined to fail. In his 2016 book, Creative Schools, Ken Robinson explains how there's an irony of how this system works. Instead of being incentivized to improve their scores like schools should be, they instead feel threatened by their scores not meeting standards. And it's easy to see how students are affected by this, but how are teachers affected? Well, in these sorts of environments, teachers are pretty much instructed to teach the test rather than a regular curriculum. If you ever wonder why you were never taught how to file taxes or change a tire in high school? That's because it wasn't in the budget. See, schools are afraid to allocate their resources and funding to non-core classes because that just increases the risk that students won't pay attention in their core classes, and it'll lower their test scores overall, making them lose even more of their budget. In his 2018 book, Daniel Pink writes in his book Drive that there's a concept called motivation 2.0 that drives a lot of people, including teachers, and that simply means that most of them follow the motivation 2.0 diagram of where instead of doing things out of the kindness of their heart, many of these teachers are simply completing their tasks in order to seek being rewarded. So do your job and get paid, and that's it. That's the unfortunate truth of how this system is. And all of this spells disaster for the community, because a poor school with failing students that hate their classes and don't have any extracurricular activities or classes that they enjoy, they end up bringing down the quality of the community. When our students represent our future, why is it that we allow a scam like standardized tests to determine their worth? In a 1997 book, High Stakes Testing, Is It Worth the Risk? The benefits of standardized testing are weighed against its downsides, and the answer is obvious. Sort of. See, standardized tests are great for rich schools, but not so much for poor schools. So how did it get so bad? Well, it wasn't always so bad. It seemed like a great idea at the start to incentivize schools to start focusing on their test scores and do their best to improve them. But here's the thing. When schools already lack the resources to get their scores up in the first place, how is taking away these resources because they're not doing well gonna make it any better? It's just gonna dig them even deeper. It's a fundamentally flawed system that only benefits rich schools because it builds them up while tearing down poor schools and poor communities. And in 2016 journal, Revising the Pedagogical Form, it's determined that students develop tunnel vision when taught these strict curriculums. They miss out on skills like critical thinking, and they end up doing even worse on their tests, unfortunately. So desperate, schools turn to their teachers to stick strictly to their curriculum. And this killed the creativity of many teachers. Students step into the classroom hating it because the teacher just reads out of the textbook and hands out state-approved worksheets. They just build up this bank of information in their mind that they keep for the weekly test only to throw out to make room for next week's test. A 2005 journal titled "The Effects of Standardized Testing on Teaching in Schools" determined that teachers cannot be effective in this sort of system. They need to be unchained and allowed to be creative so that students can find some sort of connection, some sort of human connection to become better students and allow them to become better teachers. So if schools can't get more money, how's the community going to end up? And it starts to get stuck, really. How can the community improve if the students aren't graduating, going to university, getting higher paying jobs, and overall improving the income level, the average income level of the city? Well, it's very hard. And to make matters even worse, CSU Monterey Bay did a study in 2019 titled "How Has Standardized Testing Affected Low-Income Students?" where they looked at a low-income school and compared it to middle and high-income schools. And they found that the students of the low-income school were 5 times more likely to fail their standardized tests when compared to their middle and high-income counterparts. And if they're so stuck, then how are we supposed to help? Well, that is a bit complicated because the biggest factor really here is money. The same company that administers these tests are the ones that sell the textbooks, they sell the study guides and the worksheets. It's a sort of monopoly for them. They have no incentive to stop this system. However, there are many programs online and locally where the community themselves can donate textbooks, classroom supplies, even teaching materials. One such place is adoptaclassroom.org, where, as the name implies, you can adopt a classroom and donate money, resources, whatever it may be, for a semester, a year, however long you want to commit. And these sorts of programs allow community to take back control of the education of their children and the students. While teachers are dragged down by this system, it's also partly their fault. And that's because they have very little room to grow financially when they're a teacher. And this prevents them from really being motivated to seek to be community leaders and leaders in their fields. Unfortunately, this is the system that Motivation 2.0 has created. See, Daniel Pink, in his 2018 book Drive, also explains a concept called Motivation 3.0, where instead of seeking rewards, people seek self-fulfillment. And this sort of ideology is what allows some teachers to become the best at what they do. These are the teachers that make a difference. And if all teachers are like this, we could break free of the chains and the ransom that standardized testing creates. I became so passionate about teaching after meeting one teacher that refused to bleed into the masses and refused to allow himself to be chained to his desk by expectations set by the state. This changed my life. And if all my teachers were like this, I would imagine my community would be amazing, it'd be incredible. Unfortunately, that's not the case. And really, it's not anybody's fault. But once we can get over this, then we can go ahead and start creating a better community. So now we have a more well-rounded school system that has money. We have teachers that care. We have students that care about their classes and they love going because they enjoy it. So what happens to the community? Well, students are graduating more. They have better paying jobs. They are bringing in more income to the city. Thus, schools no longer need the community to feed them. And in fact, the schools can create and add more extracurricular classes for the students, and the students are now graduating more knowledgeable and more well-rounded. This is great for the community. Fairtest.org has an entire campaign dedicated to destroying the tyranny that standardized testing has created. I'll go ahead and leave a link below so that you guys can go ahead and visit their article explaining their cause and showing you how you can help and standardized testing in your community for your own kids or your family members or whatever the case may be. Thus, we reached the end of why standardized testing isn't very great at all. I could go on for hours and hours about why this system sucks, but for now, we've gone ahead and we talked about many of the problems that standardized testing has on our communities. Then we talked about how these problems came to be and how they became so big. And finally, we talked about how we can begin to make a change. I'm very passionate about this topic, but all I ask of you is that you think about how you felt when you sat in on those tests, only to get a paper in the mail a few weeks later telling you that you could have been better. And then I want you to think about how you wouldn't want your kids to feel the same way in the future. Thank you.